Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well and having a lovely day. So if you're subscribed to my vlogging channel, then you will know that I recently passed my driving test, which I cannot believe. Like, still I'm just in shock and I'm like, this is not real. Like, did that happen? I'm just over the moon about it. But I wanted to do a video where I talk about my driving experience, so right from the minute that I started learning right up until the minute I passed. It has been quite a long, challenging journey, so I kind of just wanted to sit down, share my experience with you guys, share my tips and advice, and kind of just round up this whole thing. And yes, let's just get into it. I've wrote some notes to kind of help me. So I'm currently 20 years of age, which you probably would not have guessed because I do look very young. So yeah, a lot of people ask me why I didn't start learning to drive until I was 20. And the reason for that is because I just wanted other things in life before. When I started working at 16, I just worked and saved like crazy right up until I was 18, and then I did a bit of travelling and volunteering. So that's kind of what I wanted to do, and I just could not afford to do both. But when I was 18 and I finished travelling, I was interested in learning to drive, but I just never had the confidence to actually go for it. I just kind of said to myself, okay, you're never going to be able to drive, you're not confident enough, you're so nervous. I just didn't like the thought of going for lessons and like being in the car alone with like an instructor. I just thought it would be awkward, and because I have social anxiety, I was like, that is like my worst nightmare, just like having to make conversation with someone, and I just thought it would be the most awkward thing ever, that I would just be so difficult to teach that I would never learn it. So I kind of just put it off. And then one day when I was 20, I was like, you know what, let's just do this. Like, I knew for ages, and like it was always in the back of my mind that I actually did want to drive. I just never had the confidence, and so I just went for it. From putting it off for so many years and then finally just like sending away for my provisional, I was like, oh my god, like nervous but like really proud of myself and kind of excited about it at the same time. I think it was May 2018 that I sent away for my provisional, and then I spoke to my dad about wanting to learn to drive, and my dad knew someone who was a driving instructor. He was like a friend of my dad and my uncle, so my dad knew that he was a good instructor. He told me that he was like really patient and that I wouldn't find it scary learning with him, and so that made me feel a lot better, because like I said, that was like one of the things I was really scared about. I knew that if I got a really like horrible instructor that was like shouting at me, then I would just like not go ahead with learning to drive. So it definitely helped that I knew that I was getting a good instructor. So I had to wait a couple of months until this instructor had space to fit me in for lessons. So my first ever driving lesson was on the 21st of July 2018, and I was actually like really excited about learning to drive. Like, obviously very nervous as well. I'd like never been in a car or like in the driver's seat. I just had no idea about cars. Like, I was so clueless. Like, I didn't even know what all the pedals were. I didn't even know how to turn on a car. But I actually really enjoyed my first lesson, and I found it kind of like exciting to be starting to learn to drive. I was so confused by the clutch like for ages. I remember like even a good few lessons into learning to drive, I just did not really understand what the clutch was and what it did. I remember I had to like learn a rhyme to tell me what the clutch did. It was like up to go and down to slow, because I would like keep putting it the wrong way and then like roll back and just not understand. I was actually a really slow learner. Like, it took me a long time to just get the simplest things, and it just really helped that my driving instructor didn't like push me or rush me, and just let me just learn at my own pace. And I think it's so important that when you're learning to drive, you get the right instructor for you, and for me that was definitely the right instructor. I'd rather just take things slow and actually really understand them, rather than trying to rush through everything and just not really have the basic skills, because when it comes to driving you really do need to master the basic skills before you move on to anything else, because if not, it just gets more complicated like further down the line. For a good several lessons I was just, you know, doing the basics. Took me ages to just really understand the car, and then finally when I progressed into more difficult things like roundabouts, again took me months and months and months to get, and I'm even gonna admit like I still suck at roundabouts. Like, that's my weak point. But what I'm trying to say is everybody learns at a different pace, and that's completely okay. So in general, I found driving lessons just very difficult and like exhausting and draining. I have anxiety, and I didn't realise how much that would affect driving, like learning to drive, it affects it so much. I used to find driving lessons the most terrifying experience ever. I just got so anxious and so worked up every time that I had a lesson, like days before or like even the night before. I would just get so stressed and worried about it if I knew that I had a driving lesson coming up. I was just such a nervous driver. It's so strange because when I started off learning to drive, I like really enjoyed the lessons, and I was like obviously nervous because it was like my first time driving and stuff like that, but I like enjoyed it, and I was like, oh, it doesn't matter that I'm a rubbish driver because, you know, it's only my first lesson, it's only my second lesson, it's only my third lesson. But when I went further down the line, I started to just put so much pressure on myself, and because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I would just get really annoyed at myself if I didn't do well or if I made a mistake. But what you have to realize is when you're learning to drive, you are going to make mistakes. It's the only way that you can learn, and it's only going to make you a better driver. So as I started to gain more and more experience, I actually became a more nervous driver and got more anxious behind the wheel, which doesn't really make sense. I don't know, it's my brain, it's weird. I'd probably say the part where I got really nervous about driving was probably when we started talking about taking a test. It just freaked me out so much, and I'd say that's probably when I started like making more mistakes. It just made me be a lot more harder on myself, and I put so much pressure on myself that I didn't enjoy driving lessons anymore because I was just stressing so much. So anyways, yeah, I was taking driving lessons, started in July 2018. I then took my theory test in October 2018 and I passed first time. I'm not going to go into that just because I've done a whole other video on that, which I will link down below, giving you guys my tips to pass your theory test first time. So yeah, that was all good. I got that out of the way, was really happy about that. So once I got that out of the way in October, that's when my driving instructor started talking about a test. But he wasn't like, oh, let's do a test next week. He was like, oh, in another couple of months you'll be doing your test, like you're almost there, you're almost ready. So for weeks leading up to my test, I was just an absolute mess. I was panicking so much, stressing so much, just telling myself, oh, I'm never gonna pass, I'm gonna fail, I'm not ready. Just, I did not want to go through it, and the more like I thought those negative thoughts, the worse like my driving lessons were getting. I remember just having a few bad lessons on the lead up to my test, and I was just getting really like scared every time I had to drive. It was just the most horrible feeling, like this anxiety that I would get, and I would just literally just, my heart would be beating the whole time during my lessons, and it was horrible. I was just constantly on edge, and I was like, when am I gonna ever just be able to like relax when I'm driving? I just never had that feeling. So anyways, the day of my test arrived, even though I really did not want it to, and my test was on the 18th of January 2019. So up until this point I had had 37 hours of driving lessons, and I'd had 9 hours of private practice. I didn't have my own car, so I couldn't like practice in that, but occasionally I hired a dual control car and my dad would take me out. I can't remember the recommended hours, but I'm pretty sure the average for someone in the UK to pass is like 45 hours of lessons and 20 hours of private practice, so I hadn't had anywhere near that amount, but hey ho. Anyways, to cut a long story short, I failed my first test, which I was gutted about. I was absolutely devastated. I'd worked myself up so much, and I basically got in the mindset that if I failed, it would meant I was a failure and that I was a bad driver. I was never going to pass my test, and so I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but when I failed my test I did cry, and I was like heartbroken. At the time it felt like it was the end of the world and that there was going to be no light at the end of the tunnel. It feels so stupid saying it now, but at the time it was the most horrible feeling. If you've ever failed a driving test, you can probably relate. It's not a nice feeling, and it doesn't matter how many people say, oh, it's fine, you'll do it next time, or you've got plenty of time, there's no rush. It just doesn't really make you feel any better. When I went into the test, it was just like an absolute blur. I kind of felt dizzy and like just really weak just from being so nervous, because taking a test is really nerve-wracking as it is, but because I have social anxiety it just made it a billion times worse. Like, I don't like tests as it is, but because it was a practical one where a examiner is constantly watching you, it just terrifies me, because one of my biggest fears is people watching what I do, which is also why I found like driving lessons so like scary and intimidating. Like, even though my instructor was the nicest guy in the world, it just made me feel so scared that someone was like constantly watching me. And I would always do this thing. It really annoyed my dad whenever he took me out driving in the dual control car. I would always be like, I'm sorry dad, I'm sorry, if I ever made a mistake, and he'd be like, stop apologising. And I did the exact same thing to my instructor. I'd always be like, sorry. I think it's because I'm such a perfectionist. I don't like doing things wrong, and then I feel like I have to apologise, and then my instructor's like, you don't need to apologise, everybody makes mistakes, that's how you learn. But I just didn't see it that way. So anyways, for my first test I had a female instructor. I remember I got in the car, she asked me a tell me question, I knew that one, so that was fine. Drove away, she was like, oh, follow the sat nav, so that was fine. Yeah, I followed the sat nav really well. I remember just like driving and being like, oh my god, I'm doing pretty well, what's actually going on? That was like my exact thoughts. I was like, I've never driven this good, like normally I make loads of mistakes, like what's going on? And then she asked me to pull up, and then she was like, okay, this is your maneuver, do a parallel park. I was like, oh god, that was the one that I really didn't want. Like parallel park is the thing that I am worst at, like the worst maneuver. So I like pulled up alongside the car, and then I was about to go into reverse, and then like 2 cars came behind me, but like there was no way for them to get past anymore. So that kind of like stressed me out, because I was like, oh my gosh, 2 people are waiting behind me, they're gonna be so impatient, just get really angry at me. What happens if they like toot the horn at me or something? So all these thoughts were going through my head, and I like rushed my maneuver because I didn't want to annoy the people behind me, when in actual fact I should have just taken a deep breath, been like, okay, I'd rather do this really slow and get it right rather than rush it and just completely mess it up. Like, why did I feel the need to please the people behind me? I felt like such an idiot afterwards. So anyways, I could see these people in my mirror. I was getting stressed, I was getting panicked, so I like turned in and I went back, and then like they went past me, and I was like, oh my god, thank god. And then that kind of just like put my train of thought all wrong, and I like got really close to the curb, and then like I tried to like fix it and turn in, and then I thought I hit the curb, so I like totally panicked. Like my heart rate started going, I started like sweating and shaking, and I was like, oh my god, I just failed my test. I was so panicked. I could just feel the examiner's eyes just like burning, staring at me, and I was like, oh my god, just like pure panic. So I thought, oh my god, failed my test, just hit a curb, what the hell do I do? So I like pulled forward and then kind of like reversed in again. I think I probably like almost cried. I was like in such a state. She must have known that I was an absolute like wreck, because she was like, okay, just take a deep breath, it's okay. And I was like, okay, she said that because I failed, so now I just need to take a deep breath and just carry on even though I failed. So she was like, take a deep breath and carry on when you're ready. And I was like just so panicked, I just wanted to get the test over and done with, so I like didn't even breathe. I just like checked around me and then just pulled off, and then literally I pulled off like that much. There was a junction right there, and then instead of going into first gear to stop, like I always do that, I just left it in second gear because my mind was still thinking about the fact that I had just failed at that parallel park, and I was thinking about how badly it went. So then of course when I went to go off again, I was in second gear, so I stalled and the car like jumped and then went out onto the road a little bit, and I was like, oh my god. By this time I literally just wanted to cry. I just wanted to get back to the test center. I was like, why is everything awful happening? Like I had had the best 20-minute drive ever. Because I had to do a parallel park, it just like went wrong from there afterwards. So when I stalled, I literally just shook my head and just went, oh my god, to myself. Went into first gear, drove, and then it was like, oh, the independent driving is over, I will give you directions from here on out. I literally drove perfectly after that. Drove into the test center, parked. As soon as I pulled into the test center, I literally just wanted to cry. I just wanted to go home. It was the most nerve-wracking experience of my life. And she turned around to me and she was like, I'm so sorry to tell you, but you failed. And I was like I knew I'd failed, but it was just horrible hearing those words. And I was like, yeah, I know, that parallel park was so bad. And she was like, no, that was just a minor. You got 1 minor and you got 1 serious, and so I'm afraid I have to fail you. And that kind of like hurt more, because if it had been the parallel park, then I would have been like, okay, fair enough, like that was my fault, I messed up. But because she said you got a minor for your parallel park, and I was like, what? I thought I hit the curb. And she was like, no, a minor, because you had to like pull forward and like adjust it. And she was like, but you fixed it, so it was just a minor. And I was like, are you actually kidding me? I thought that I had failed because of my parallel park, and I got myself in such a state of my test, and that I can guarantee is what made me stall, was because I was thinking about the parallel park and how I just failed. So that was extremely annoying. And she was like, no, you failed because of your stall, because it was like on a junction and you kind of like jumped out a bit. It was a bit dangerous. Like there was no other cars there, but I get what she meant, because like if there had been other cars, I went like onto the road and then stalled. And I was just so annoyed because I never stall. The last time that I stalled before my test was literally on like my 3rd or 4th lesson. Like stalling was just something that I never do. It seems so silly now getting so upset over it, but at the time I was like, oh my god, I just felt like such a failure. I think the main thing was it just really annoyed me that it was one thing that made me fail. The fact that I got one minor, and then just the fact that I stalled is the only reason that I failed. It just really bugged me. And also just because I told so many people that I was sitting my test. And I remember when my driving instructor was driving me home, I was just thinking, I don't want to tell my dad I failed, because before I left he was like, oh, you'll pass, no bother, you're a great driver, I've seen you, you're an amazing driver. And I just felt like I didn't want to let everyone down. So my driving instructor drove me home. He was trying to give me like encouraging positive words, but I just felt so overwhelmed from everything, and I literally just wanted to go home and curl up in a ball and just cry. I was that upset. I'm so embarrassed now because I got so upset in front of my driving instructor and in front of like my family when I got home. It was like so embarrassing. I'm so embarrassed about it now. So when I got home I literally just cried to my mum, and my mum was like, Lucille, it's not the end of the world, why are you being so silly? But at that time I just didn't see it that way. I was just so devastated. I think also because like I always just thought everybody passed first time. Like I'd never heard of anyone having to resit a driving test before, and it wasn't until I failed that I realised that it's so much more common than I actually thought. So I felt like absolute crap, and it didn't really help that I had to go to work right after my driving test. So I came home, like ate lunch, and then I had to go into work feeling like absolute crap and my eyes all puffy from crying. But my driving instructor told me to get straight back into driving. He said that the worst thing I could do was let this knock my confidence, and so he recommended that I get straight back into driving as soon as possible and that I book another test. So I rebooked my test, but there was a long waiting list, and I think it was like nearly 2 months until I could sit my test again. So I was kind of a bit like, oh my god, 2 more months. I kind of just really wanted to drive. So about a week and a half or 2 weeks after I failed my test, I got back into my driving lessons, and I had 3 more driving lessons before I resat my test again for the 2nd time. So I took my 2nd test on the 15th of February 2019. So by then I'd had 41 hours of lessons and still the 9 hours of private practice. So basically between my 1st test and my 2nd test I only had 3 more lessons. But I remember my driving instructor saying to me, like, you don't actually need those 3 lessons. But he was like, obviously I know you want to take these lessons just for peace of mind. But he said he didn't really think I needed them. It was just like an unlucky day where I failed on a stall that I don't normally do. And the strangest thing is, after failing my test, I felt like a much more confident driver, because even though I failed my test, sitting that test made me realise that I actually can drive on my own and that I'm actually a good driver. Like I remember whilst I was sitting that 1st test, I was just so surprised with myself, because I just thought that I was always so reliant on my driving instructor and that I wouldn't be able to drive without like him helping me or giving me little hints here and there. But on that test I literally drove the best I've ever drove, and apart from that stall, like I drove really good and I was really proud of it. So for the 3 lessons after I failed my test, I just felt so much more confident. I just felt like a much better driver and that I was actually starting to enjoy driving. So when it came to my 2nd test, I was obviously still very nervous. I felt really sick with nerves. I was just super scared about it, but I think that's normal. It's normal to have nerves. A lot of people said to me, oh, you feel so much more confident going in for your 2nd test because you know what to expect, but to be honest I don't think I really did. I felt more confident in my driving ability because I knew that I could drive, but I still felt super nervous just because I don't like tests as it is. I just don't really like the unknown of a driving test. You just never know what can happen on a driving test. So much can go wrong. It's not a test where there's only one right answer. Like, driving is so unpredictable. So many different things can happen on the road and you just really don't know what's going to happen and you don't know what to expect. And for my second test, I also knew how easy it was to fail. Like, before I'd ever sat a test, I never thought that you could fail like on something like a stall or something like that. I just thought if you're a good driver you'll pass, but it just really doesn't make sense to me, the tests, like the way they judge them. So in a way that kind of made me more nervous because I was like, I could really easily fail again. Like, even though I think I'm a good driver, it just takes one little thing, I could fail on that. So just before I took my second test, we were pulling into the driving test centre. My instructor was like, okay, reverse into this bay and then you'll be ready to like start your test. So I reversed into the bay and then I like put too much steering on it and I like messed it up, and then that kind of just like made me really panic before I went in to do my test. And I remember just like not even being able to breathe and just like being so nervous. And I said to my driving instructor, I was like, I'm really scared, I don't want to do this again. I just hate doing tests. And I was like, I can't go through this again. I was like, I'm gonna mess this up. And he was like, you need to have a positive attitude. Don't be thinking these negative thoughts, or if not you'll make that happen. You have to think positively. And so he was like really reassuring and gave me really good positive advice. And he was like, right, are you ready? And I was like, yes, let's give this a go. So this time I got a male instructor and he was really nice, he was really friendly. I felt more at ease with him as well. My battery just ran out of charge because I've been talking for so long. I really need to speed this up. But yeah, I don't know what it was, I just felt more at ease with this driving instructor, which definitely just made things a lot better. So as soon as I pulled off from the test centre, I thought I'd failed because basically I was doing my test in the lorry test centre just because the one for the cars was getting done up. So I was like with all these big trucks, and I like pulled off, like literally moved like this much, and I thought I'd failed because I went to like go out the junction and then this massive lorry came in, and I thought I hadn't left the lorry enough space to actually like get into the junction, and it was so close to me, like by this much, and I was like, great, let's see, you're literally 5 seconds into your test and you failed. I was like, oh my god. But luckily the lorry managed to get past, so I was like, maybe I failed, I don't know. But I was like, anyways, let's just give it my best shot. The first test I did was like in the morning, so there wasn't much traffic, but this test that I did, like my second time round, it was in the afternoon and there was so much traffic. It was like a Friday afternoon, so much traffic, like loads of mums and dads driving to get their kids from school. So there was so much traffic, so it was a lot of like stop start sort of stuff, really busy roundabouts. So I kind of like just had to just go for it and just like really put my foot on the throttle to get out of the roundabouts because it was so busy. So I thought that that would be a lot more difficult, which it was to a certain extent, because obviously busier traffic, you have to be quicker and you have to just be really alert. But I guess that kind of helped me as well because I was like so focused. I was like, so much is happening here, I was just so focused. So in a way the traffic kind of helped. There was a few times in the test where I was like, I really don't know if I'm doing this right, but they all seemed to just like work out and the universe was on my side this time, which I'm so thankful for. So I've got this green sheet here which tells me my minors, because I actually can't remember for this test. I got 3 minors, so I passed the second time round, guys. Still cannot believe it, still over the moon. Literally the best day of my life. I'm still in shock. So I got 3 minors. The first one was use of mirrors, change of speed. So I think that was, oh yeah, this was when I was on the dual carriageway and he asked me to come off at the next exit, and I like was really confused about when I like change over into the lane. I didn't know if I was like gonna change over too early, but I didn't want to change over too late, so I kind of just didn't really know what I was doing, and so I kind of like just slowed down. And he said to me, you should have checked your mirrors, signaled, and then slowed down and moved over. Instead I'd like slowed down because I actually wasn't sure what the hell I was doing. Like slowed down, I was like, maybe I should check my mirrors, or like looked in my mirrors, and then I went like signaled and went over. So I kind of did it in the wrong order, and he was like, if someone was behind you they'd be like, why are you slowing down? Whereas if I'd had my indicator on first and then slowed down, they would have known what I was doing. The other one was for junctions, approach speed, and again this was a slip road going onto a dual carriageway. I was coming around the corner just before going onto the slip road and I was too slow. I will admit I'm a really like cautious driver. I like to drive slow. I don't like to speed, especially around corners, but he said I was too slow, but not slow enough for it to be serious, so it was just a minor, which again is good. And then third and final minor was for junctions, again turning left. I actually don't know what one he was talking about, but he said when I was turning left at a junction I should have been more over to the left and like tucked into the corner. Instead I was like kind of straight. I should have been tucked in. I'm not sure what one he was talking about, but to be honest I'm just so happy that I passed and that I only got 3 minors. I'm honestly just over the moon. Never thought this day would come. The only other bad thing that happened to that test, when we were on the way back to the test centre, literally like 2 minutes away from finishing the test, he was like, take the next right at the traffic lights, and I was like, yeah, okay. And then he was like, the right at the traffic lights. I passed the traffic lights. In my head I had heard take the next right at the roundabout because I was just so nervous. I was just like hearing things, and so I was like kind of like braked kind of harshly, and I was like, I'm in the wrong lane, I'm just going to continue on. And I was like, oh god, I failed now. But he was like, it's okay, just do a complete turn at the roundabout and then we'll go back to the test centre. And so we got back into the test centre. He said your manoeuvre is reverse Bay Park, and then I was like a bit panicky because, as I said, like before we started the test, whilst I was parking my car, I like messed up the reverse Bay Park. So I reversed in, and I was so happy when I looked in my side mirrors to see that I was literally in the space and no more. If I had been like this much over, I would have failed because you have to be within the white lines, and I was just like, my wheels were just on the white line to my left, and I was like, oh my god, that was such a jammy one. That was really close to being a fail. And then he was like, okay, I'm just gonna finish my paperwork here. And then he was like, okay, you've passed. And I was like, are you sure? Like, I just could not believe it. I cannot explain what an amazing feeling it is. It was honestly the best feeling in the world, and it was so worth all of that stress that I went through. I'm so happy that I passed second time round, and I just want to say, if you ever fail your test, like, it's not going to be a nice feeling, I know that, but just know that it's definitely not the end of the world. Like, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I failed first time, because it has made me a better driver. It made me realise that I actually can drive, and it's helped build my confidence. I definitely saw a massive change in my driving and in my confidence in my driving since I failed my test, and so in a way it's been a blessing in disguise. Like, I'm just over the moon. So I'm going to try and go through all of my tips for like learning to drive and taking tests as quickly as possible, because I am very aware of how long this video is. So I've written down a list. So the first one I've said is get a good night's sleep before your driving test. So you might be like, how do I get a good night's sleep? Because if you're like me, for my first test, was so nervous, could not sleep, took me a while to get to sleep, just kept on thinking about it, kept on waking up and thinking about it, just was so nervous about it that it affected my sleep. So for my second test, I actually cannot believe that this still happened and actually worked. I used a driving test anxiety hypnosis session that I found on YouTube. I will link it down below. I listened to about 5 minutes of it, and that's all I remember. I remember I woke up at like 4 AM. I had my earphones in, my phone was beside me. I was like, what on earth happened there? Like, what is going on? I was so confused when I woke up. I was like, I have no idea what's going on. Basically, I'd listened to it and just fell asleep without even realising, and that never happens to me, like ever. I need complete silence to go to sleep. I never can fall asleep listening to music or anything. I just need complete utter silence, and I cannot believe that I fell asleep whilst listening to that. So what I remember of the video was really good, but I definitely give it a go, because even if it doesn't help with your nerves and anxiety, it might do what it did for me and actually put you to sleep. I'm honestly so thankful that made me fall asleep so quickly, because if not I would have just been like tossing and turning all night just worrying and probably would have got the worst night's sleep. So definitely do something like that, or do some sort of meditation or something to just like calm your nerves and hopefully help you get a good night's sleep, because it's very important that you get a good night's sleep so that you have energy and full concentration for your driving test the next day. One thing that massively helped me improve my driving skills was watching driving videos on YouTube. I have a load of people that I watch. I will again leave them linked down below. There's like so many good driving instructors that make YouTube videos to help you improve your skills, and they're so useful and helpful, and I've definitely seen an improvement in my driving since I've started watching them. But I do want to mention one in particular in this video, which is Go To Driving School. So Go To Driving School is a channel by an instructor, Matt, who uploads videos to help you learn to drive and improve your driving skills. I have found them so useful whilst learning to drive. I've watched practically all of his videos. My favourites in particular are like watching his mock test videos. So he films like him doing mock tests with his students, and it really helps to like pinpoint where people go wrong in their tests and helps you to then avoid making those same mistakes. So they're really useful, and he's such a nice guy as well. He's very passionate about his YouTube channel and helping others become a better driver, so I definitely give his videos a watch as well. Another tip is to tell as few people as possible that you're sitting your test. Like I said, for my first test I told quite a few people, but for my second test I literally only told my mum and my dad. It just puts a lot less pressure on you to pass, and you don't have to worry about if you fail like having to tell people. Definitely revise your show me tell me questions, which again I will leave a video link down below that helped me learn the answers to them, because again if you just get that out of the way, you know that you are confident with answers, then you don't have to worry about that. Like that part of your driving test is done and dusted. If you know them, then you know that you're not going to pick up any minors on them, and that gives you more chance of passing your test. I definitely recommend that you take your instructor along for reassurance as well. For both my tests I had my instructor in the back of my car. You can choose to have your driving instructor in the back of the car with you, or you can just ask them to wait at the test centre until you're finished. I decided to take my driving instructor with me on both occasions just because I felt like it made me feel a lot more relaxed. I mean, I wasn't really relaxed to be honest, but I feel like it would have been even worse if I didn't have my instructor with me. I just felt like it was so reassuring having him in the back, someone that I know. It didn't make me feel as awkward as if I was like alone with an examiner. It just would have terrified me a lot more. It was just better knowing that my instructor was in the back. And also, if you fail, it's really helpful if you have your instructor with you, because they can see where you've gone wrong and they can help you get better. The last few tips I've got written down here are: don't be afraid to ask the examiner to repeat things. You are allowed to ask them to repeat directions and things, so don't be afraid of that. Also, exaggerate mirror checks. For a test I would just say just over exaggerate them. Just make sure that your examiner can see that you actually are looking at the mirrors. Just like even put your head forward a bit more, just like exaggerate it so that they can definitely 1,000,000% see that you're looking in your mirrors, because like even if you give a little glance they might not see it. I mean, they should, but if you just over exaggerate then they can't say that you haven't looked in your mirrors, because you're making it very obvious that you have. And my main tip is, when things go wrong, just take a step back, take a breath and calm yourself down. And also, if you think you failed, keep on going, give it your all, because what you think you failed on might not be a fail and you might be able to redeem yourself later on in the drive. So just keep on giving it your all. So there we go guys, that is the end of this video. This has been super long, so thank you so much if you have watched all of this. I hope that this has been somewhat helpful. Learning to drive has been one of the most stressful, exhausting and difficult experiences of my life, but I'm just so happy and proud now to say that I have done it and that I have a driver's license. It really just does not feel real. I honestly never thought this day would come and that I would be able to drive. So if any of you think that way and think that you won't have the confidence to learn to drive, just know that it can be done, and to just keep on going. Like, even if you're finding it so difficult, keep on going, because it's so worth it when you get there in the end. It took me like 7 months to learn to drive. I'm not sure if that's like below or above average. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments below if you know. But again, it's different for everyone. Like, I know people that have passed within a couple of months. I know people that have taken like a year and a half or like 2 years. It really doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there, as long as you get there in the end. That's all that matters. Also, share your driving experiences down below in the comments. I would love to read them and get back to you guys. Let me know what your tips are for driving lessons and driving tests if you've been through those. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again in my next video. Bye!